Welcome again, friends, to the YouTube channel where we discuss and contemplate the wonderful salvation available to us in Messiah Yeshua and the marvelous impact he can have on our lives if we just let him. Today I'm going to destroy the two arguments that anti-missionaries use to fight those who believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. Those two arguments are that Messiah doesn't come twice, and that Messiah Yeshua has not completed his work. And we will see those two arguments decimated in this video. Okay, so we will establish three premises to do this. They are undeniable premises, and the arguments that I make here are undeniably logical conclusions because they come direct from Jewish teaching and not outside Jewish teaching or other philosophy. We will establish three premises to do this. First is the importance of the book of Song of Songs. Second is that God is married to Israel. And finally, we're going to understand how the Torah, Jewish law, manages and dictates Jewish marriage should work. Before I go on, I want to remind you that the Midrash Rabbah, the collection of Jewish writings on the Bible, on Genesis 1:2, says that the spirit of the Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, that hovered upon the waters, was in fact the same Spirit of Messiah. Well, if that's true, then Messiah is God and God is Messiah. So when we talk about the betrothal of God to Israel, which we will, we're going to be talking about the betrothal of Messiah to Israel. Okay, let's go. This is going to be exciting. The Song of Songs. The rabbis teach that this is an allegory for the God and Israel. The rabbis teach us that this is a love poem between God and Israel. Rabbis teach that there was a wedding ceremony between God and Israel. He got engaged to Israel at the Exodus, and he got married to Israel, the final step, at the giving of the law, the Torah, at Mount Sinai. We see, and we will understand in a moment, that Torah dictates that marriage, Jewish marriage, is a two-step process. So we see that God is married to Israel and sees his relationship with her in that way. Again, as I say, we see that Jewish marriage is a two-step process, and that's going to be important, so bear that in mind. In fact, Song of Songs is so important to rabbinic thought and to Judaism that it's read during the holiday of Passover in synagogues, in most synagogues around the world. The reason it's read at Passover is because it's a love song, and we see that God's love is shown for Israel at the Exodus. Okay, now let's go on to the next premise. Let's see how Jewish marriage law works. As I said, it's a two-step process. First is what's called kiddushin, and then it's called what's called erusin. I'm not going to go into the complicated laws here. There's just not time. But just know one very important thing. In ancient times, it was a year apart. In other words, a groom would go marry a woman. He would depart from a year and come back, and they would have the final step of the process. So, let me just recap. The groom gets engaged to the woman, leaves her, and then comes back for the kiddushin is done. He leaves. He comes back a year later for the erusin, which is then the final bond between man and woman. This, by the way, was changed in the 12th century for various reasons. Now, let's understand something. Jewish law, Jewish marriage, is not a haphazard set of rules. It's a God-given system. And therefore, we understand that it has meaning and purpose. Even if we don't always understand that meaning and purpose, it has meaning and purpose. But there's an idea that we can understand here. Sanhedrin 98b, Sanhedrin 98, folio B, expresses the idea that the world was created for a Messiah. Now let's understand this idea. If the world was created for the Messiah, and law, the Torah, is given at Mount Sinai, then the marriage laws must also foreshadow Messiah. Here's the astounding idea. The marriage laws foreshadow Messiah. If marriage between a man and a woman is a two-step process, where the two steps are separated, then how much more so Messiah? Messiah in his betrothal to Israel comes to do Kiddushin, goes away for a time, and then comes back for the final step. Friends, this is astounding. You must be listening to this. You must think about this. This is not just some lofty idea. This is Torah law. And we're talking about Jewish understandings here. The idea that in marriage, in Jewish marriage, there's a two-step process, and there was a separation for a year. We don't do it that way now because it was changed in the 12th century. But according to the Torah, there's got to be a separation. So God, who's married to Israel, also has a separation. He comes, he gets betrothed in the first, he does Kiddushin in the first coming. He leaves her, and then comes back for the second piece, which is Erusin. Wow, this is incredible and undeniable proof that Yeshua is the Messiah. You have no more argument, friends. The major argument I've seen around that that Messiah doesn't come twice, I've just proved to you that it's not only proper and fitting for Messiah to come twice, it's almost Torah ordained that he would come twice. We don't have to understand why he comes twice. Why couldn't he do everything when he came the first time? We don't know. We don't know. We don't have to know. This is how the Lord, how Hashem has ordained the Messiah to come to his nation and to the world. Messianic texts are also filled with allusions to Messiah and his bride. So I just want to say a couple of things here. Couple of final thoughts. Jewish marriage has two banquets. There's the banquet for Kiddushin, and then there's the banquet for Erusin. Okay? We know that the Last Supper, the so-called Last Supper, was a banquet of sorts. Okay? It was a banquet of sorts because Yeshua gathered with his disciples and ate a meal. We also know that according to Revelation 3:20 and 19:9, that Messiah is going to have another banquet. Well, what does it sound like, friends? I mean, again, it's the two banquets of marriage. Finally, I want to say one thing to you. The book of Song of Songs is messianic as well, because it's read at Passover. And think about this. The holiday of Passover is when Messiah betrothed himself to Israel. So we see this final wonderful connection between Messiah and Song of Songs, between Messiah and betrothal, and to the idea that Messiah has to come twice. So yeah, Messiah hasn't done everything that has to be done yet. It's not done yet. He's only come once. He's gone away. When he comes back, everything will be done that Jews expect to be done. We don't have to understand why this is so. But the fact of the matter is that this is the way it is. This is why his work is not complete. And it's okay that it's not complete because it's part of God's plan. And God says, my ways are higher than your ways. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts. So let's not waste time arguing with him. Let's just accept the idea that Messiah is Yeshua, and Yeshua is Messiah, and there's a great salvation. And friends, if we turn away from this salvation, if we play around with the judgment of God, there are so many videos on these channels that show you that Messiah is Yeshua. If you continue to resist the salvation of God, how will you stand? How will you be able to stand in the judgment day of Messiah and of God and say, well, I didn't know, or I didn't understand? You know. I've taught you. I'm giving you the ideas here. Friends, if you're thinking to yourselves, boy, this makes a lot of sense, I'm really understanding Messiah in a way I never have, then say this prayer with me. Messiah, I hear you knocking at my door. Come into my heart. I understand your revelation. I accept your revelation in my heart. Please come into my heart and change my life. Help me live a holy life. Friends, if you have prayed that prayer, you are a child of the King. You have the true revelation of godliness in your hearts and in your minds, and you can begin to live a godly life, and you will have the peace that passes all understanding. And friends, if you didn't pray that prayer, I ask you again, as I always do, what are you waiting for?